All right, it's Friday, December 29th. This is an end of the day and end of the year SPY recap where we kind of will recap today on the daily chart and then go over a little bit of a recap on the year and what the outlook is going into next year. But for today, it was a 2-down day where we kind of held below the midpoint of the prior day, took out the prior day low, worked down to target number 1 and target number 2. This target number 2 area was the open of the week, purple line, and we held there and kind of rebounded a little bit. That was kind of an inflection point in terms of what might happen, whether we'd really follow through much lower or hold a little bit in that area. For now, we kind of held a little bit. It leaves us with a weekly bar that's sort of narrow here, and we'll get into in a minute that we could certainly start off next year with a 2 down and have a target down here and have a fair value gap down here. And what that all means, I'll get into that in a minute. And especially given the fact that we've been up 9 weeks in a row now straight up, not surprising at all if we do get a 2 down week unfolding. But we haven't had one yet, so we'll let price action lead the way. In terms of today, just one more time, after this narrow little bar here yesterday, we would have only looked to be buying if we were above the midpoint of that bar, breaking above the pre-market highs, the blue line level here. And instead, we started near the bottom of the pre-market range, had a little green bar to start, but then we failed here on bar 2 and 3. To me, once we failed the breakout, got to the midpoint of that bar, it was probably a good opportunity to try a short. I actually missed that one. And then, once it broke down, I kind of used a little short-term pullback to buy some puts, and it ended up being a nice trade, making 1 push down, 2 pushes down, sort of, to that key level here. And at that point, we got a little bounce. So we end up with a bit of a hammer bar. It's sort of red, but we'll see what that means going into next week. So today, the good trade, was definitely classic 2 down, had a target below, somewhere down here, and we broke below the pre-market low and the first bar low. So it was, a lot of things aligned for a good trade to the downside, and it not surprising, it was just a morning trade and it didn't really give you any kind of secondary trade to test those lows again. So that's how we end the year. Again, I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a pullback into next year, but as long as we go up, up, up every week, stay above the midpoint of each day, you never know. So we'll let price action lead the way. So let's get to a bigger picture kind of outlook right now. First of all, the yearly chart. So we end this year with a inside green bar. That's all this really was. Even though it was a big year to the upside, in the end, it was just kind of an inside bar for 3 years, 2 years in a row now. So we're sort of just in a big consolidation area. If I really zoomed it out, I'd say the trend is up. This was just major consolidation and we're still heading up. And once you see a green bar like that, you do expect it to at least test higher at some point going into next year. At that point, since it's an inside bar, we determine whether this fails or whether we just break out and head a lot higher. Now, 2 things. If we're going to head a lot higher, it's going to stay green and it's going to hold above kind of the midpoint of this year, and that's what this blue line is here. So if I zoom it out, which I will eventually, any kind of pullback, as long as we hold in here, we could, on the weekly chart, turn back up and start a yearly chart much higher. But what we're going to look for, and this is kind of the way I'm going to view coming into the year, once we came up on this year green, it was green, and you had 3 years in a row pretty strongly up. You're expecting a little follow through higher. We got follow through higher very early in last year, and then we immediately turned red below the open, and we stayed red all year. So I'm just showing you at the beginning of the year, if the open price starts red, you stick with that in terms of the context until proven otherwise. Then this year we kind of came red. We took out those lows. It was kind of an outside bar. So anytime you have an outside bar, that could be, you don't know if you're going to get continuation or if maybe that's just higher highs and lower lows and you start back up. As it turned out, the open of this year was a green right out of the gates, and we had one little brief moment where we tried to turn red, but it really came right back, and we were green the whole year. So the continuity was up all year, even with some of the months that might have been a little red in here. It was exciting to get back to the upside when that developed. So keep that in mind. And this year, we expect higher, but we might, we're going to see where that open is, and we're going to kind of use that as a reference point for the rest of the year. This could easily just follow through much higher, or it can consolidate, as it's been doing here. And this consolidation can go on for many years, quite frankly, if it decides to turn red and stay red. So, everyone says, well, can you predict what's going to happen next? I can't predict it, but I certainly know what to look for, and I know the key levels. I know the opening price. I'll know if that stays red, then we're not anywhere near, moving higher. And if we stay red, as long as we hold above, the midpoint here, and then we start turning green on the weekly chart, I might anticipate the yearly chart will turn green. So those are the types of things. You have your expectations, but you can't predict it. You just let price action lead the way, and when everything aligns, that sets up some of the, the best opportunities. So in terms of, like I said, coming into next year, I expect to test higher. I don't know if it's going to happen right out of the gates, and at that point monitor it, or if it's going to start lower on a pullback. Given this weekly chart looks like it's ready for a little bit of a pullback, at that point we'll monitor the halfway point of the month here. So if I go to the monthly chart, like I said, if we get that pullback, the monthly chart here, the green line is the halfway point of the month. So if we pull back to start this month, I expect this green month to follow through a little higher at some point, just given that it's green, and most green bars, at least test the highs. So if we start lower, hold the midpoint, I'll be excited to buy to the upside. If we start to the upside first and get to our yearly target up here, I'm going to see if the yearly open stays green and continues higher, or if it maybe reverses at this point, and then you kind of start going from there for the rest of the year. So in the end, what I'm anticipating, I guess if I had a guess, but I would say this kind of bar looks like, you're getting ready for some kind of pullback. The pullback, to me, I would be excited to buy some puts and get short and hit this target, and kind of expect to go into that target, into that, fair value gap in here. And I would expect price to hold in there and then hot higher. But again, I can't predict it. I just know what levels to look for along the way. So, with all that in mind, you have the monthly chart that looks to be wanting to continue a little higher. You have a weekly chart that's getting a little bit exhausted. And you have a daily chart here at the moment that is a bit of a hammer look, and we'll have to see if we start above the midpoint and try to go higher, or start immediately lower and take out the weekly low next week. I can't predict how the year is going to start, but I certainly know the levels to look for and what to expect. And then the interesting thing is, if I expect lower, for example, let's say we go lower and we get this 2 down week and we never reach our targets, then I get real excited once price eventually moves higher, because I know the big picture, monthly chart's up, yearly chart's still up, and we can't even come down and reach targets to the downside. So that's the kind of the way trading all comes together. And the best trades are obviously, if you look at this year, we started here, here was the open at this red line right here, and we stayed green all year. So once the charts, were green on the yearly chart, and then you get a certain monthly charts where you get green from the open, those are the, type of opportunities where then you're looking for great buy opportunities. Obviously, here was some red months. So when this month was red, you were kind of, the big picture was up, but the maybe the intermediate term was down a little bit. So you had to kind of know that was in play, but you also were getting excited for any kind of a turn to the upside. And that's where you kind of look at the weekly chart. And, I remember this particular thing started maybe a 2-up week, but it failed. It went into this fair value gap. And then this 2-up week was a very exciting upward. And I shot a lot of videos at the time, if you go back to November, why this was an exciting outlook for a bigger picture move, at least up to here, and then maybe even to the highs of the year. And it ended up doing that. So we've been biased to the upside ever since November. And again, it all fell in line with the context of the various time frames and how they all were, getting back in sync. So that's what you look for. Again, can't predict anything, but you certainly know some of the key levels, and that's what we will continue to monitor for starting next year. And we will see, really I'm interested to see in terms of this big range in here. We came down, we went up to the top, we're getting to the top of a range. Is it possible that we fail up here and start some kind of big move all the way down, and we last in a big trading range for a long time, or do we break out of this area and continue higher? So I think there's going to be a lot of context involved how we handle this area once we get there. But for now, we're expecting to get there. It's just a matter, I don't know if we do it right out of the gates or if we pull back first and then go up. So that's sort of the first thing I'm looking for. And from there, we'll see how the rest of the year goes. But the main thing is I'm going to keep in mind that yearly open, whatever it is. And if it happens to get red, then I'm going to, stay red and kind of monitor if we can get through the halfway point of the prior year type of thing. Or if we fail up here and then come back through the halfway point of that year, that could be a big failure in the big picture to start working towards these lows. So there's a lot of, ways to kind of monitor it. And again, we'll look for things. The main thing is when things line up and everything's in sync, the various time frames all line up, and there are moves that don't reach a certain level and then reverse back the other way in line with context. Those are the best trades. So we will see where things go. But for this week, we'll see. It's a kind of a bit of a neutral, week that's losing a little momentum. So let's see if we start lower or higher going into next year, and then we will follow price action as always from there.